With my 100th review coming up, I thought it was only appropriate to talk about this game, Sonic's first official jump into 3D with Sonic Adventure. For this review, I'm going to be using the PC version of Sonic Adventure DX. While not the original, it should serve as an acceptable stand-in for what I'm going to talk about, as aside from a graphical overhaul on the character models and a few added things, it's mostly the same. Sonic Adventure was originally intended for the Sega Saturn. Takashi Iizuka said that the Sonic World environment in Sonic Jam was actually a prototype level for Sonic Adventure, but because the Dreamcast was coming out, they jumped over to that platform. Which unfortunately meant that the Sega Saturn would never get its own official Sonic game, and it's often debated that if the Saturn got its own Sonic game, that it would have lived. Yeah, Sonic had some 3D titles, but 3D Blast doesn't count as isometric games only give the illusion of 3D. Sonic R and Sonic the Fighters were 3D, but they weren't proper Sonic games. And Sonic Extreme was cancelled due to problems in development, mainly because Yuji Naka was being a dick to the developers at the Sega Technical Institute in America. But on September 9th, 1999, we got our first real 3D Sonic game. Well, for some people, myself included, it would be a week later because Sega had burned a ton of discs incorrectly and they needed to be recalled. I remember this because my local EB, before GameStop bought them out, had to test every single Sonic Adventure disc before they gave them to the customers just in case they didn't work. And if your copy worked on launch day, then you were one of the lucky ones. But now that I look back on it, it seems like it was a bad omen for the future of the Dreamcast. I wish I had some Dreamcast footage to compare the graphics, but I don't. I do remember that with the original Dreamcast release, they were good for the time. However, for the DX release, they're not really that good. It looks more like a prototype. The characters have new models, but they don't look finished, especially when compared to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, which came out 2 years prior. The models may be updated, but they're still using the same old skeletons. That's why all the cutscene animation is really clunky looking because it's the same animation used on the Dreamcast. To me, that comes off as lazy as they put in the bare minimum effort to update the game. The 3D models also have this weird plastic shine to them, and the lighting doesn't look that natural. But I'll forgive the not so good graphics, I just can't stand hearing these characters talk. The voices fit the characters for the most part, but the voice actors do a really bad job of acting out the characters. Dean Bristow, the voice of Robotnik, is the only one that I can say is actually acting. Ryan Drummond, Corey Bringus, Michael McGrahm, and Jennifer Douillard, who voice Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy respectively, mostly sound like they're just reading their lines, not acting. Once in a while we get some emotion, but I wouldn't bet the farm on hearing it a lot. E102 Gamma sounds and acts like a robot, so that's fine. And John St. John voices Big the Cat. Yeah, Duke Nukem voices Big the Cat. I imagine that his only direction for voicing Big the Cat was to sound fat and stupid. And if that's the case, nailed it. The music is really good. If there's one thing that Sega is good at, it's music. Each character has their own theme song, and there's the overall main theme to the game, which was pretty amazing at the time considering that this was something we really didn't see in the Sonic franchise. The stage music is really good and pretty varied. It has a very nice balance of musical instruments, unlike Sonic Adventure 2, which comes off as heavily using the electric guitar. The main theme of the game, Open Your Heart, is one of the most iconic themes in the Sonic franchise. It's up there with Live and Learn. However, I still think that His World is one of the best themes so far, although the Sonic Generations remix of Open Your Heart is pretty close to dethroning that. The characters control pretty good, responding very well to the analog controls, but jumping feels rather floaty, except for Big, who falls faster than all the others. Even Gamma doesn't fall that fast. Each character has their own moveset, but only 4 characters have a secondary jumping action. Sonic has a homing attack, Tails will fly, and Knuckles and Gamma glide. There is an action button, but the characters only have one move tied to that button. Sonic has a spin dash, Tails will attack with his tails, Knuckles will punch, Amy will use a large hammer that I can only assume she squirrels away in her vagina when she's not using it, Big will attack with his fishing pole, and Gamma will lock onto things to shoot at. There's also other actions that will happen if a certain condition is met. If running fast enough, Tails and Knuckles will roll instead of their normal attack. Amy will launch herself into the air, and Big will cast his fishing rod if you hold down the action button. And they're secondary actions, but to get those you need to get the upgrades. Each character has at least one mandatory upgrade, and the rest are optional, but I do recommend getting them. Sonic gets Lightspeed shoes which allow him to dash along trails of rings, and the Ancient Light to do the Lightspeed attack. It's the same thing, only with enemies. Tails gets the Rhythm Badge, allowing him to do continuous tail attacks. Knuckles gets the Shovel Claw so he can dig. Amy gets the Warrior's Feather so she can do a spinning hammer attack. Gamma gets a Hover Module, and Big has a Life Preserver that lets him float in water. The optional upgrades are Sonic's Crystal Ring, which charges up the Light Dash faster, Tails' Jet Anklet that lets him fly faster, the Fighting Gloves for Knuckles that lets him do his own light speed attack, Amy gets a bigger hammer, Gamma gets an upgraded blaster that explodes in a wider range, and Big gets the Power Rod and a couple of lures. The optional upgrades are worth getting. Except for Knuckles' fighting gloves, because his own version of the light speed attack is kind of bugged, and I've never had it work properly for me. And speaking of buggy things, the camera is really bad. It gets caught up on a lot of things. You go around a corner, it gets stuck. You go down to a lower platform, and it gets stuck. And for some reason, it'll fall below the floor and points upward, and will get stuck there. This game came out when I was in high school, but when I went to college and took up 3D modeling and animation, I got to wonder, why did they make the camera a solid object? That's really the issue here. The camera is solid, but the line of sight is not. That's why it gets stuck. Yes, the camera is solid, so it doesn't pass through the walls, so you don't see the outside of the game world, but it would be a small price to pay if it wasn't solid, then it wouldn't get stuck. Now, I understand that this comes off as foresight, but these games are play tested for quality assurance. It makes you wonder that if these camera issues were brought up during that process. The camera is the worst part of this game. It's the one thing that's been universally criticized in all of Sonic Adventure's incarnations. I would have expected them to fix the camera in the DX release, but I'm only kidding myself as Sega has a very take your money and run attitude. But I digress. Sonic Adventure has 6 different types of gameplay elements at work, and this is when Sonic games diverged from platforming and focused more on speed. After all, they now had hardware that could really deliver the speed that a 3D Sonic game would require. And this is where Sonic fans became divided, and all mainstream game critics would never be pleased with anything Sonic related. Sonic fans are just so divided in what they want that when Sega gives one side what they want, the other side complains. No one ever agrees which ones are good and which ones are bad, and Sega just doesn't know what to do anymore to please anyone because Sonic fans just can't accept that the game that was released does what it was programmed to do and does it well, except for Sonic 06. We have Sonic fans and critics complaining that Sonic games are about platforming and exploration, and that it's not about getting to the goal as fast as you can. If they focus more on platforming and exploring, they would have to sacrifice the speed, which is what makes a Sonic game a Sonic game. I never thought I would see the day when Sonic fans would complain about a Sonic game being fast. You really want to go there? You really want a Sonic game that focuses on platforming and exploration? Are you telling me that you want this game again? Sonic 06 focused heavily on platforming and exploration, but it was also incredibly slow, and any actual speed was automated. Do the new modern Sonic games have sections that are automated? Yes, but they're meant for boosting and are nowhere near as abundant as the automated sections in Sonic 06 or as bad as the high speed zones in that game. Sonic games were never about exploration either. You only had different routes to get to the goal. Sure, you could find little bonuses if you go off the beaten path, but that's all games. Sonic games are not designed to be like Jak and Daxter or Banjo-Kazooie. If a Sonic game were to be made that focused on platforming and exploration, speed would have to be sacrificed so there would be more control for platforming, and people would complain that it was not a Sonic game because it was too slow. Or people who criticize the modern games for, and I'm quoting them here, feeling like a racetrack. Do they not remember how linear Sonic stages were in Sonic Adventure? Or in Sonic Adventure 2, a game most Sonic fans worship, whose stages were the very definition of linear? And platforming in both those games was pretty minimal. Now here's a fun little experiment that you could do yourself. Go to any Sonic review on YouTube, anyone will do, and just start reading through the comments. And if you don't suffer from a brain aneurysm, you'll see why we can't have nice Sonic games anymore. Okay, that little rant is over. Anyway, Sonic's gameplay consists of high-speed action of getting to the goal. Tails has to beat Sonic to the goal, and if you get the jet anklet at the very beginning of the game, you have no excuse for losing. Knuckles has treasure hunting, and it's actually fun in this game. Then Sonic Adventure 2 came along and screwed up the radar and hint system. Amy's gameplay is classic platforming. Gamma has shooting and platforming, while Big has fishing. And I know that a lot of people hate Big as a character and hated his stages because they didn't like fishing, but there's no reason to complain about his stages because they can be completed in under a minute. And Big also has the shortest game. From start to finish, including travel time and cutscenes, you can finish it in about 20 minutes. 10 minutes if you skip the cutscenes. So I don't see any reason why anyone should be complaining about Big stages, especially when he has the shortest game. If you really want something to complain about, it's Amy. She's slow, probably slower than Big because you almost never run at her full speed, and her game is 45 minutes long, and 30 of that is all cutscenes. Sonic's game is about 2 hours long, Tails and Knuckles are about 45 minutes, and Gamma is 30, and Super Sonic is about 20. So you're getting about a 6-hour game, maybe about 2 hours if you skip all the cutscenes. There's a total of 11 stages, and they're all shared between the 6 characters, but each character gets a different experience. Sonic gets 10 stages, and his are the longest, and he experiences the full stage. Tails gets 5, but only goes through about half the stage. Knuckles has 5 and gets the smaller sections of the levels. Amy has 3 but goes through the sections that other characters don't. Big gets 4 but has the smallest sections, and Gamma has 5 stages but gets about a third of each stage. All the stages are really fun because you get a different experience with each character, which makes the game world more believable. And the adventure fields make it feel like you're on an actual adventure, which also helps making the game world feel believable. Now, I said earlier that Sonic games are not about exploration, but you can explore the adventure fields and some of the stages. Sonic really can't explore because of the linear nature of his stages. Tails can explore because he can fly, but you really don't have the time to do so because it's a race. Knuckles is perfect for exploring, as that's the nature of his gameplay. Amy and Big can explore, but there's really nothing for them to look for, and Gamma is on a time limit, so he really can't explore either. And now to talk about the story. And I'm going to say this as clearly as I possibly can. This game is 15 years old. If you have not played it by now, you have forfeited your right to complain about lack of spoiler alerts. At some point before the events of the game, Robotnik finds a stone tablet somewhere about a creature that, after getting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, will turn into a gigantic beast of destruction. He plans to use this creature to destroy Station Square to build Robotnik Land. On a side note, this is the game that introduced the name Eggman to American audiences. Yuji Naka has stated that his real name is Dr. Ivo Robotnik, but he goes by the alias Dr. Eggman or just Eggman. So starting with Sonic Adventure, they decided to merge the two identities into one. While I grew up calling him Robotnik, I refer to him as Eggman as it's the more commonly used name, although you gotta admit that Robotnik does sound more menacing than Eggman. Eggman shatters the Master Emerald as chaos is sealed inside it. Without the Master Emerald, Angel Island falls into the ocean and it starts Knuckles on his quest to restore it. Chaos lands in the Mystic Ruins where Froggy drinks his tail, swallows Big's lucky charm, a Chaos Emerald, and escapes, sending Big on his quest. Chaos arrives in Station Square just before Sonic and the two fight. The next day, Sonic rescues Tails and they go to the Mystic Ruins where Eggman tells them of his plan, sending them on their quest to collect the Chaos Emeralds. The next day, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles meet up and fight Chaos again. Then Eggman reveals the egg carrier. Sonic and Tails go after him in the tornado while Knuckles continues his quest for the Master Emerald. Sonic and Tails get separated after the tornado is shot down. At this point in time, the main story splits in two, where Sonic helps Amy and Tails goes through some character development while he finishes the tornado too. The egg carrier flies over Station Square, then a bird hits Amy, dragging her into the story as Zero, an Eggman robot, pursues her. She meets up with Sonic only to get separated and kidnapped by Zero. Sonic gives chase but loses them as they're brought onto the egg carrier. Sonic meets up with Tails and then they both land on the egg carrier. Now at this point there's some inconsistency with Gamma, Big, and Knuckles. Knuckles and Big both follow Gamma to Eggman's base in the Mystic Ruins at the same time, although Knuckles and Big never meet. Gamma also went from the base to the egg carrier to the Emerald Coast to the egg carrier again, meaning that the egg carrier must have landed at some point before taking off again. This is the only inconsistency that I found with the story. Other than that, it holds together pretty well. All of the characters convene on the egg carrier. Sonic has Tails take Amy off the egg carrier and Gamma leaves as well. Sonic fights Chaos and Big rescues Froggy. Eggman escapes and Sonic follows. Knuckles is left to fight Chaos again and the egg carrier crashes after Knuckles leaves. Big and Knuckles' stories end here. Tails and Amy land in Station Square. Tails finds Eggman who launches a missile to destroy Station Square, but it's a dud and he follows Eggman to stop him. Amy goes to his base in the Mystic Ruins to find the bird's family. Gamma heads on a quest to free the animals inside the other E-Series robots. Tails' story ends after he defeats Eggman, who retreats to his base in the Mystic Ruins. And Amy goes to the egg carrier to find the other birds. Gamma is already there to free Beta and Zeta and the animal inside of him. This is another one of those sad moments in gaming history, mainly because of the music that plays, but it's not as sad as Damus's death in Jak 3. Amy and Gamma's stories end here, and Sonic follows Eggman to his base for the final showdown, and Sonic's story ends there. After that, you get to unlock the Super Sonic story, where you do battle with Perfect Chaos, and afterwards, Chaos becomes nice again, and him and Tikal depart to who knows where. I find that the story is a lot more solid when compared to the flimsy writing of Sonic Adventure 2. Now, I know that someone is going to crawl out from some rock somewhere and try to assert that Sonic Adventure story is inconsistent. You have to keep in mind, each character's story is told through their perspective. It's how they experience the same event. This method of storytelling was made famous by the 1950s Japanese drama movie called Rashomon. So yes, characters will say different things depending on how they perceive the event, or how the character they're talking to perceives it. I really like how they did this. It gives you a different experience for the cutscenes, and something of an incentive not to skip the same ones. When it comes down to it, Sonic Adventure has not aged well, and Sonic Adventure DX has aged even worse. The original Sonic Adventure's graphics looked like something you would see on the N64, only with a much higher resolution, especially when you look at the people of Station Square. Now that's not a criticism because at the time we did not know what the Dreamcast was capable of yet graphically. The DX release is just a port with Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Big's models being updated only slightly. The most noticeable change is that they have actual hands instead of mittens with line textures for fingers, and their shoes are updated to look like shoes instead of blocks. The character animation is terrible because they didn't bother to update the skeletons for the models and reanimate the characters. And a lot of Eggman's cutscene dialogue is recycled from the boss fights involving him. Even though this game has badly aged, I would still much rather play this one than Sonic Adventure 2, which also didn't age that well. To me, Sonic Adventure just offers more when it comes to gameplay. Yeah, Sonic's levels are linear, but it gives me all the Sonic and speed that I want from a Sonic game. Tails is fun because you could just break the stages by crossing huge gaps. And I enjoy treasure hunting with Knuckles because it's not the chore that Sonic Adventure 2 makes it. I don't care for Amy's story or stages, but I never cared for the character anyway. Big's game isn't as bad as everyone makes it out to be because you can finish it in 10 minutes. And I really do enjoy Gamma stages, and while the camera is buggy and can cause you to die the occasional stupid death, it's something that you can work around. Sonic Adventure is one of those you had to be there type of games to fully enjoy it. While Sonic Adventure shows its age pretty badly, it's still a really good game and it feels like an actual adventure. And I guess you could say that we'll see our heroes next week in another adventure.